This is where the famous...
That's very pragmatic. I do appreciate your position. Yes, Tatiana wants to say something to you.
This is the very, the very famous US soft power when it comes in, when they say, look, don't align with the US, just do exactly what the US wants, talk some sense into Putin. So it's basically align with the US, but let's all make an impression that you're not aligning with the US. But you did bring up some really great points there, Peter. The fact that the US and the UK that did and will, for the foreseeable future, act as the US's proxy in Europe, have literally invaded the half of the Middle East on a whim, on false intelligence, overthrowing governments. The only reason that Assad is still in power is because Russia intervened, and you still managed to invade Syria against the will of the democratic president that did not consent to it because the US was fighting terrorism, because the US decided that it's very necessary somewhere where the Russian military is already operational, and it's really good, to say the least. This is the problem. This is essentially the problem with what's going on today. It's the US way or no way. And this is where Moscow has said, and I'm extremely personally happy that our allies like India, like China, are saying, each respectively in their own way, saying that, look, we have our national interests. There is no one right way. And it's definitely not the US way and not the UK way. With all due respect, the last country that should lecture India on how to do everything or anything is the UK. You've had your turn. You're out of there. And you should stay out and mind your own business.
If I may add one point, Tatiana, to what you've said there, we've been watching. At least my generation in India has been very closely watching how our foreign policy has changed over the years. We are the generation that came out of college from Indian universities after the economic reforms. And so we've seen things change. And yes, I must say that we were perhaps very aligned to the Soviet Union, and then we became unnecessarily too aligned to the Americans. And Brahma, you'd remember we were positively embarrassed when a previous Indian Prime Minister told George Bush that the people of India love you. And we always asked Dr. Manmohan Singh, who gave you the, the right to say that the people of India love you? We were surprised and a bit horrified and embarrassed, in fact. Now what we are seeing is something completely different. We are seeing an India that is playing its cards, truly. And can I give an example of this, Peter, to you? We have had 5 foreign ministers who visited New Delhi in the last week. The Prime Minister of India has not met the Chinese foreign minister. Wang Yi only met the National Security Advisor and the Indian foreign minister. He was not given an audience with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But the Russian foreign minister has had that meeting today. Brahma can tell you more about the significance of that. Brahma, don't you agree? That itself is a statement, that India is choosing which cards are important at which point of time. Brahma, would you like to expand on that from our strategic perspective?
Well, I agree with you, but I think there are 2 larger concerns that I have. First is the single narrative dominating the discourse in the West. This is very unfortunate because despite the diversity of opinion in the West normally, you have a single narrative dominating the discourse today in the West. And in that narrative,
yes,
the fight over Ukraine has been portrayed as a battle between democracies and autocracies. Nothing could be further from the truth. Zelensky's regime is no less autocratic than Putin's. And yet, the narrative being pushed by the West is that Ukraine is a democracy that has been invaded by an autocracy. Another thing that really strikes out is that punishing Russia for invading Ukraine has ceased to be a means to an end and has become an end in itself. This may explain why Biden has discarded some key principles of diplomacy, including avoiding insulting another country's head of state so as to preserve space for direct negotiations. Now, if you look at the way Biden has increasingly personalized the conflict by hurling a steady stream of insults at Putin, he has called him a butcher, a murderous dictator, a pure thug, a war criminal. And the use of aggressive language began long before the Ukraine war, Just weeks after Biden entered the White House, he called Putin a killer. By contrast, Biden has treated the Chinese President Xi Jinping with respect. Not a single insult has been hurled at Xi Jinping by Biden. That tells you a lot. But the unintended consequence of Biden's insults is to seriously constrain the space for the US and Russia to reach an understanding to rein in the conflict. Look at the irony. Even as Ukraine and Russia are negotiating, the US is nowhere in the picture because the overriding focus of Biden has been on punishing Russia instead of seeking to find a way to end the war. Biden is only slapping more and more sanctions on Russia. Just yesterday, he slapped more sanctions on Russia. This is, this is the most dangerous moment that the world is facing since the end of the Cold War. And if I could just,
I agree. When this whole